Hey friends, it's just the Gems. I'm frickin' freezing down here. I don't know if it's cold where you are, but it is frickin' cold in the Midwest. Oh my gosh. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. I wanted to talk about Trails in the Sky. First chapter. Yes, the remake of Trails in the Sky that's coming out some point this year, this fall, from Gung Ho. Gung Ho Entertainment is the company bringing it over. And I don't know, words can't fully describe how excited I am. However, I don't want to say that I have concerns about the remake. They're not so much concerns. It's more that I have a wish list of things that I would love to see in these remakes that I don't think we're likely to see. And I'll get more into why in a little bit. Trails in the Sky, when I first played it on the PSP, actually on the Vita, but it was a PSP game, it was just, I don't know, I had put it off for so long because the name sounded kind of generic, didn't sound all that interesting. But when I finally gave it a shot, I just was like blown away by how simultaneously nostalgic and like revolutionary it felt, right? It's that old school kind of JRPG, but it's presenting this world and this story that has never been done at this scale in video games before. And I love it. I'm just so happy that they are finally going back, revisiting these early games, putting this new coat of paint on them, making them more accessible for newcomers. I'm kind of relieved to finally be on the same side as the people that say you should start with Trails in the Sky when everybody asks, where do I start the Trails series? Because I've always been like, start at the arc that looks the most interesting for you. Don't feel like you need to start at the beginning. Now I can say, yeah, honestly, the best place to start is Trails in the Sky first chapter, just the modern remake, right? So that's great. I'm like beyond happy that that's the case. But first and foremost, I just want to go through some of the big things that I would really personally like to see in the Trails remakes, okay? Shall we? Can we? Let's. Oh, by the way, if you like this video and you like the sorts of things I do, would you please like the video and subscribe? It helps me out a ton, and I really appreciate it. Okay, anyway, one of the biggest things that I think would improve the Trails series, not just Trails in the Sky, FC, or any particular game, all of them. One thing that would improve every single Trails game if they would do this, good dungeons. Okay, it sounds like I'm trolling a little bit. I'm not. All of the dungeons in every Trails game are very bad. They're very bad dungeons. They're just boring corridors with doors. Sometimes there's a switch you need to hit that opens up a door or a pathway somewhere else. Lots of enemies to fight. Sure, fine. That's it, right? Like they are just the most cookie cutter. They could be randomly generated and I don't think I would know. I know some of them are, like the Reverie corridor, but like I would be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me every dungeon in the Trails games all been completely randomly generated. I'd be like, yeah, checks out, makes sense. They're not good. There's not a ton of artistry or thoughtfulness that goes into them, right? They're very cookie cutter. And, you know, we're on game, 13, 14 at this point with this series, and I don't feel like we've seen any improvement in the dungeon design from the very beginning. We've seen improvement in just about every other area. Gameplay, graphics, characters, story. Everything has grown and evolved naturally over the course of the series. The dungeon design hasn't. So what could they do in Trails in the Sky first chapter to make this better? Give some thought to the places that you are exploring. Right? If you are going into one of these tetracyclic towers that are going to come up throughout the first arc of the game, you know, they are so straightforward and basic, but, you know, you could, I don't know, add a little bit of lore in there. Like let's, you know, have some, I don't know, some drawings on the wall that sort of tell a history. You know, let's create puzzles within the dungeons that are a little more complicated than like push this button over here to open this door over here, right? We don't need to go full Legend of Zelda or whatever, but like something that's a little more engaging as we make our way through these dungeons, because I don't know how many more corridors I can run down, right? Before I'm just like over it. Maybe I am over it. I don't know. It's not going to stop me from playing the games. It never will, but you get what I'm saying. I think of the dungeons in Persona 3 and Persona 4, right? In Persona 3, you have Tartarus, and it's very basic. It's just one dungeon, really, randomly generated floors. It changes color a little bit as you go up. You get different sections that are distinctly flavored, but it's basically one dungeon. In Persona 4, you have a series of distinct dungeons, at least in terms of their theme, but really it's similar to Trails. It's just corridors, rooms, enemies. That's pretty much it. Persona 5 was where the team sat down and thought, you know what? We've been making a lot of improvements in every area in this series. The thing we haven't really solved yet is the dungeons. And so what they did was they created the palaces. The palaces in Persona 5 are extraordinarily designed, right? Like these are intricate, interconnected places that have, traps and puzzles and enemies and everything that you would want. They don't feel like a real place so much because they're not. They're like in a headspace. They're in sort of the metaverse or whatever, but they feel coherent in and of themselves. I would love to see some of that design sensibility brought over to the Trails series. The Trails series, more than in my mind any other series, is deserving of level design that is on par with the storytelling that it's striving to achieve. I would love to see better dungeons. Do you agree? Like, what do you think of the dungeons and Trails? Like, do you prefer the simplicity? Like just the straightforward, give me some hallways, give me some rooms, let me kill some bad guys and move on? I mean, that's fine. I'm curious, like, if that's what you prefer, or if you kind of see it more my way, you'd like to see more intricacy in the design. Let me know down in the comments, please. Okay, so moving beyond the mechanics of how the game plays, there's a few, I don't know if story is the right term for it, character aesthetic things that I would like to see some tweaks. Because I'm pretty sure that they're not just gonna wholesale redo this with the exact same script everywhere. No changes necessary. So if they're gonna make some changes to the Trails Sky sub-series, these are some things I would like them to consider. First and foremost, some tweaks to some of the character relationships. I don't want to cause a fury, but Tita and Agate is a little gross. I mean, I get that Tita is a little girl. She's 12 in Sky first chapter, I think, 12. Agate is 26, 27. They don't have any romantic relationship, right? Like they are drastically different in age. He seems to see her as like a little sister type person, and she looks up to him as like a big brother type person. No problem there. I think that's sweet. I think that's adorable. That's great. Tita's great. Where I run into, issues where I have kind of icky feelings is all of the characters, all of the other characters, constantly making jokes to them about them having some sort of romantic relationship. I could see, in every group of friends, there's that one friend who makes jokes that maybe are not the most appropriate, maybe doesn't have the greatest sense for the vibe of the room and says some off-color things. Everybody has that friend. If you don't have that friend, you are that friend. So just keep that in mind. So if there's one person, if we want to have Olivier be the weirdo that makes these jokes and everybody else is like, okay, man, that's a little gross, that's fine. But everybody is making these jokes at them. It's very strange. If we could just tweak that dynamic a little bit, I would really appreciate it personally. What do you think? I know I'm kind of making a mountain out of a molehill there, but it's something that has just kind of squicked me out, and I would love to not feel that way. Yeah. Speaking of making changes to relationships, things like that, little more, aesthetic things, story things, I really hope that they do some more foreshadowing. I don't know exactly what form I would want that to take, but obviously 20 years ago when they were releasing Trails in the Sky first chapter, they didn't know everything that they were going to do in the series, right? And that's okay. A lot of people make a big deal out of the story writer needs to know the whole story before they sit down and begin. Otherwise, it's inauthentic. They're just flying by the seat of their pants. They're making it up as they go. Like that's some kind of a bad thing. It's not. It's fine. But now that they have the opportunity to go back, I hope that they do bring in some more foreshadowing of things that are going to happen later in the series. Because for people playing it, especially for the first time, starting with the remakes, that's going to be a really, really cool experience to see some of these things pay off in future games. And there's precedent for this, right? Like they've done this before. When they remade Zero and Azure or remastered them or whatever, they added in characters from Cold Steel, right? Like they put some characters from Cold Steel who would have been present, and we know were present based on what happens in Cold Steel, into Zero and Azure, so that you can meet them and interact with them. Like that's the kind of thing I'm thinking is if there's a character that we know would have a good reason to be present, they can be present. Like let's go ahead and start laying the groundwork for some of these things that are going to come later in the series, because it's just going to be super cool for, like I say, especially the people that are just starting out with the series, starting with the remakes. That's going to be so cool for them to experience later down the road. And also, I think it'll be cool for us that do know what's going to happen, just to see these nods and feel like the series as a whole is more cohesive, more coherent together, right? It seems like a win-win, like there's no reason not to do it. I mean, the reason not to do it would be if you're like the purist where, you know, if you're going to remake it, it needs to be shot for shot and every line of dialogue needs to be exactly the same or it's bad. Like, I don't feel that way. So anyway, yes, more foreshadowing would be great. And okay, this is another issue that I have similar to the dungeons where it's kind of across the board. It's not a distinctly Trails in the Sky problem. It's actually not a Trails in the Sky problem at all because those games predated what I'm talking about. What I would like to see is more voice acting, okay? Whether you prefer Japanese or English, doesn't matter to me, but I would just like for there to be more voice acted scenes. And when there are voice acted scenes, I would really, really like for them to be fully voice acted. Right? Not just the first 4 lines are voice acted and then it just switches seamlessly to text only. Not 3 characters in the scene are text only, but 1 character for some reason is voiced. I love the Trails series so much, and maybe that's why I feel so strongly about these things, but like that drives me nuts. That's like the weirdest decision. I have to imagine it's a budget thing, right? Like they can't afford to pay all of the voice actors to do. These are long games. Like there's so many lines. And if you were going to voice every single one of them, that's going to cost a lot of money. And the series, you know, is popular, but still niche enough that they can't, you know, they're not guaranteed that investment back if they spend all that money. However, I think that if they can push it, if they can really do this up in the most, impressive way, they stand a better chance of bringing new fans in, which will, you know, the tide will raise all the ships, right? The whole series will see a boost if they can really impress people out of the gate with this Sky remake, right? So more voice acting, or at the very least, if we're not going to have more voice acting, more consistency across the game with how the voice acting is used. I'm fine if you just want to have scenes that don't have any voice acting at all. Okay, I get it. Like I said, it costs a lot of money, but then don't throw in random voiced lines, or don't have 2 characters that are voiced and 3 that aren't in the same scene. Just don't do things like that. They're all voiced. None of them are voiced. Choose a lane, and I think that's great. Like that would be perfect for me. This is something that Falcom would have had to do, right? So this isn't on the localizers. This isn't on Gung Ho or like NIS America for the other games. Like Falcom would have to decide to do this, right? So I'm really hoping that they do that. Yes. Now, if Gung Ho or NIS America wanted to push to add additional voiceover for English that maybe wasn't present in the Japanese version, I am never going to say no to like, hey, you get more stuff. That's great. You know, I think, did Xseed do that with Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2? I want to say that they added Reen lines that weren't voiced in the original release when they brought them out on PS4. I think that's the case. So it's not impossible, right? That additional lines could be added for the Western release. So just something to think about, Gung Ho. Just throwing that out there. The last thing within the game itself that I would really like to see, a change in the Trails series that I would be thrilled about, is a large seamless world. Now, what I mean by that, I don't necessarily mean I want Trails to go open world. That's maybe too much, right? Like the Trails series has always been about storytelling first and foremost. You know, I wouldn't say no to some more variety in side quests, right? The side quests feel a little samey. Like they always have their own unique stories, but like the things you do in side quests tend to be pretty samey. So, you know, I wouldn't say no to some more variety there, but I don't want an open world. I just want the world to feel open. Does that make sense? I want the world to be seamless. I want to go, start out in a city, walk through the city, walk out of the city, into the field, get into Van's truck and drive somewhere, get out of the truck, go to the next city, right? Like, you can corral me a little bit, like maybe don't let me go too far off the road, but just this seamless experience of the world without these loading screens, like every distinct zone. Some of the earlier Trails games like Cold Steel, like they would even have their cities sectioned off into different like screens that you'd have to load between just within a city itself. So having a seamless world would aesthetically just be super cool to me. Like I said, I don't need to explore the whole thing. I don't need to go off the beaten path and do all these extra things. If they want to do some of that, fine. But I long for the world to feel as big playing the game as it does in my imagination, right? Like, I can look at the map of the world of Trails and be like, wow, like all these countries and how they interact with each other and the different landscapes and stuff. But just to like have the game translate that into something that I can experience visually in the game would be super cool to me. Just a little thing, like I think that's likely. Again, I don't think that they have rendered the Kingdom of Liberl for Sky FC Remake as one big contiguous, landmass that you can run around. I'm sure they haven't. But to me, that's like one of the coolest like aesthetic things that you can do. Now, comparing it to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth isn't fair in terms of budget, right? Like, these are not in the same ballpark in terms of how much money is spent on their development, but the feeling you get from leaving a town in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and going out into the open expanse of the world is everything that I wanted that feeling to be. And now I just kind of want to chase that feeling. I just want to feel that more. And I would love if I could feel it from the Trails games because they're my favorite series. So that's several things that I would love to see done in the Trails remakes, right? If we're getting Sky FC, there's a good chance we're going to get Sky Second Chapter remade as well, assuming this sells decently. And then presumably Sky the Third as well. And then, the rumor mill is saying that they're already kind of putting in the preliminary work on Zero and Azure remakes in the same engine. So we will potentially eventually have the entire series with sort of graphical parity, right? Like, they're not, Sky FC looks better than Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2, certainly. But like, in terms of presentation, it's more consistent, right? So we very well might have all of the Trails games with a similar level, consistent level of overall quality. I think that's great. But if we're already going to go ahead and remake these games, I really hope that they're thinking about some of these other things, right? Some of these things that aren't just redo the graphics and add some voice acting, like, and the gameplay too, obviously, right? Like, they're using the kind of the Daybreak system, which is great. But I really would like to see more thought put into some of these other things as well. Beyond the games, I'm hoping, and I don't know how likely this is, but I'm hoping for more supplementary material outside of the games. Okay, so I love like the Final Fantasy VII novels. I think that's such a cool way of expanding the world. There's some really cool stories in there. And a lot of those characters from the Final Fantasy VII novels have been showing up in the Remake trilogy games. Like, that's very cool to me too. So I would love to see more of the Trails world in supplementary materials, if it's novels or manga or movies. We had the Northern War anime series, which I feel like Trails fans immediately like went after as being garbage. They're like, oh, this is trash, we hate this. It's perfectly fine as a show, y'all. Like, if you sit down and just watch it as a show, it's fine. It's not the best show in the world. Like, it didn't change my life. But what I loved about it as a Trails fan is I'm sitting there seeing this side of the story that we never got to see in the games. You occasionally see some characters from the games, and that's cool. Little cameos, little things, with them showing up and doing stuff. That's cool. I like that too. But seeing, Northumbria and like what they went through, kind of getting more of a sense for like how impoverished they are, how much like the dire straits that they were in that led to everything with them going to war with the Empire and, being occupied and all this stuff that happens basically kind of off screen in the Cold Steel series. It was really cool. And I'm bummed that the Trails fan base was just like so immediately like, no, this is trash. It's like, try not to be so picky, I guess. Just like enjoy stuff a little bit. Like go into these sorts of things, these supplementary materials, not with the expectation that they're going to change your life, just with the expectation that they're going to enrich your enjoyment of a fictional world. Like that's how I look at it. You know, if by some chance the series is just the best thing ever and does change your life, hey, that's a bonus, right? You get a bonus out of it. But at the very least, you're getting an experience that is enriching the story and the world of Trails. So this has been my defense of the Trails in this Trails of Cold Steel, The Northern War, I forget the whole title of it, anime series. It was fine, but it was particularly cool as a Trails fan to see things that we didn't get to see in the games. Okay. Anyway, I would just like for more of that kind of thing to happen, and I'm afraid it won't because the fan base is so picky. So please don't be so picky, I guess, is my request. Anyway, well, I guess that's it. I've rambled long enough about a bunch of stuff that I think is just very unlikely to happen. But I really am holding out this last shred of hope that some of these things, at least, better dungeons. Give me better dungeons. Give me one of these things on this list. If you are like me and you agree that there are some changes that would make the Trails remakes even better than just upgrading the graphics and gameplay and, you know, adding voice acting. If you agree with any of these, let me know down in the comments which one you agree with or which one you agree with most, because I'm just curious to see how Trails fans feel about the remakes. Like, would you be perfectly content if it was just a graphic upgrade with more voiceover, or like, are you expecting it to have more than just that? I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you've subscribed, if you haven't, would you please consider subscribing? Because like any JRPG fan, it's fun to watch number go up. So give it some thought. Anyway, I appreciate you all so much. And until next time, bye.